So, welcome to the Trailblazers Experience Podcast, the podcast that showcases and highlights in real life trailblazers, women with amazing stories, sharing their career journeys across multiple platforms. If you've watched or listened to the last few episodes, we have had some amazing guests, and my next guest is one of them. I'm going to introduce this amazing lady who is former CEO of an award-winning marketing agency called Blue. She is also a podcast host of Strategy and Tragedy. She's a co-founder of BOMBA, a creative studio for explosive brands. And she has been ranked as one of the UK's top 20 most influential female founders. She's an accomplished public speaker. Let me introduce you to Stephanie Melodia. Hi.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Wow, I'm on a pedestal.
Girl, and all of this under 30? Is that what we're saying?
Not all of it. No, not all of it. I tried to cram in a few things before that, but thank you so much for having me on the show, and what a wonderful intro. It's really funny because obviously, as you mentioned, I have my own podcast, Strategy and Tragedy. So it's funny because whenever I do those wonderful intros for my guests, the response from their side is always, wow, I wish every time I walked into a room I had that wonderful intro.
Okay, that's
and now,
a bit strange one, yeah.
wow, I really put on a pedestal and I get to experience it with the shoe on the other foot. So no, thank you so much. A pleasure to be here.
Of course, there's a thing where we say we give people their flowers now, not getting flowers when you're dead. It's like we need to celebrate people now. Let's celebrate, let's share, let's educate, so that someone else can learn. So we're going to really start with your early years and early beginnings. What was the catalyst or moment for you to say, do you know what? I'm going to embark on this entrepreneurial journey, and this is the direction of travel that I want to take. Because it's an ambitious one and a bold one.
To be completely honest with you, my first proper business, which was Bloom, the award-winning marketing agency that you mentioned as part of the intro, there was no real strategy behind that. Like, there was not a business plan. For me, the catalyst was, so I started out my career working agency side, and I worked my way up through the ranks. I had no connections. I'd moved to London from abroad. Proper like rags to riches story. Like, I actually have to tell people, like, this is a fake posh accent. Like, I'm definitely not from a middle class background whatsoever. I actually have a really unique kind of weird background, which is I actually grew up on a desert island. I grew up on one of the Canary Islands. So super random, so weird. I can get into, the reasons why and a bit more of that. But I was, sick of it. I needed to get off the island. I needed to get on with my career. And yeah, it came to the UK with nothing really. I didn't have any money. I had no university degree to my name either. And honestly, I was interviewing for like 9 months at the tail end of the last recession before I got my first opportunity, which was as an admin assistant in a creative agency for 15K a year. Like, I still remember all the details perfectly. And as then really worked my way up, and within 3 months I got promoted. By the end of my time there, I'd more than doubled that starting salary, and then moved on to a bigger company. And for me, I was really keen to make sure that I got a role that was in-house on the marketing side of things. I wanted to make sure that after so many years being agency side, that I had that in-house marketing experience before then going off and setting up my own thing. I did always know I wanted to do my own thing. I knew that I had at least some of the basic ingredients. I had that drive, that proactivity, and even my previous bosses had always, I think they knew before I did that I was going to go off and set up my own thing. And so for me, it was really kind of checking that box and knowing that, okay, I've kind of done that, I've done that. Let's go for it, basically.
So you joined as an admin assistant. So while you were at the agency, what were the key skill sets or that you thought, actually, I can do this. I think I've got something here that will be useful to this brand agency at the time?
Joining as an admin assistant all the years
Yeah.
ago, I mean, yeah, I need to cast my mind back because as much as I've got a baby face, that was quite a while ago. It was
But
just that
it's the skills that you then use to then start your own agency. So what made you said, I think I could actually be good at this?
was just, I think that like a lot of it was not even that conscious, to be completely honest. I think so much of it was just, for me, like I'm a very intuitive person and I have a very high level of self-awareness. And I think it was just naturally being guided and just knowing this is, I don't even say like my calling, but just naturally gravitating to that industry, to that world. I mean, in terms of particular skill set, to better answer your question, I mean, back then, as I say, 9 months of interviewing at the tail end of the last recession, there were things like persistence, determination, that entrepreneurialism. And and Tola, like I didn't even know half of, I say I've got a high level of self-awareness now, but like I didn't even know half of the skill sets and half of the stuff that I was delivering as value back then in my early 20s. The amount of stuff, when I look back now and I think how lucky that particular employer was to have found me. I just had all that energy and drive and wanted to get stuck in and roll up my sleeves and just make shit happen, to be honest.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about the fact that, digital creative branding has evolved so much. Like the playbook that was relevant in the 40s, 50s, Mad Men era, obviously the core principles of brand and messaging, storytelling are still there. But in terms of digital acceleration, it's things that you're learning because it wasn't there even before. So the fact that you were curious and keen and were like, yeah, let's get shit done.
It's
Is
funny you
amazing.
mentioned that because you have just unlocked a memory from that time in my early days of my career where I, yeah, exactly, where to be completely honest, like I'll be completely open and transparent here. When I started that first job in my early 20s, I was addicted to Facebook, like to be completely honest with you. And I didn't I was aware of the power that it had for businesses to be on there, but I was kind of using it as a bit of an excuse, a bit of an opportunity, if I'm completely honest, to be able to use Facebook while I was at work. A little bit. Obviously, I never took the mick with it, but I was a bit. But it's funny because like it was brand new then. Like I was telling my bosses, like, you need a Facebook page. I mean, even talking about Facebook, like who talks about Facebook now, right? But just posting, and I think I probably set up a Twitter account as well and do some. So even then, it was like, oh, okay, this like fresh, hot, new talent here is coming in and doing some social media for us, like, and and that was about a decade ago. It wasn't, as you say, it wasn't as if it was like 40s or 50s, decades and decades ago. So yeah, it's funny kind of casting your mind back in terms of like digital media, social media, that sort of stuff. But you're totally right. Like the core principles absolutely still apply. You're still marketing to people. There are still those core fundamentals of telling a story, knowing how to stand out from the crowd, knowing what resonates. The challenge now is just that it is such a noisy space. And I feel like even just, without even comparing us now to the 50s or 60s, even if we just take the past 10 years, less than that, as a snapshot, as a window in time, there's already so many cycles that we've been through, like even within that same window of social media. So for me now, the big shift that's happening is what I used to always tell people was, because it's so noisy, because there's so much going on, there's all these channels, you need to stay visible, you need to be relevant, you're better off posting frequently, consistently. But now it's actually more about, it's almost like we've gone full circle back to like the quality, producing stuff. Like actually you're better off spending some time to produce something that's really high quality, that adds value, that might be once a week instead of 3 times a day. in order to actually have success in this noisier space. Because if you're just constantly posting, you're just adding to the noise.
That is so true. I mean, Bloom, a business you started, driving revenue of 6 figures. What are some of the challenges and maybe milestones that maybe you want to talk about as your first business that you led through?
So many challenges, like spoiled for choice. Which challenge do I talk about? There were a lot of great lessons along the way. It taught me the hard way how to be strategic, because actually, before I even started out Bloom, I don't even really think I understood. I don't think I truly understood the definition, like the meaning of even just the word strategy. And it's funny because actually when I started my career back in the early days, I didn't even know what marketing was. And then here I am, fast forward 10 years later, running my own marketing agency. And now here I am a few years later with that deeper appreciation of strategy, like these new things that you learn that you come to really appreciate on a deeper level. And I think I mentioned that first for me because having that high level of self-awareness, I know that one of my biggest strengths, which is also a weakness, is that I am such a doer. So it had always been a huge strength of mine throughout my career. So especially recounting some of those early days, getting out there, just putting in that energy, whatever needs to be done, I'll get it done. I was definitely the sort of person where like, if a job needs to be done, whatever it is, give it to Steph. And you trust her implicitly, she'll get the job done, like absolutely, like no shadow of a doubt. Where that started to actually become more of a weakness for me is that when I became my own boss, I didn't have anyone else around me to put the brakes on. I remember hearing someone on a panel actually talk about this. In terms of talent employees, there's two types of people. Most people, you need to crack the whip and you need to kind of drive them forward. Very few people, there's a minority where actually you need to put the brakes on them as a boss. And I didn't realize it at the time, but the great bosses I'd had before were putting the brakes on me. And so because I didn't have that myself, and because it was like, right, free reign, I can just go for it, obviously it was a recipe for burnout. I burnt out twice because I just ran myself ragged, kind of doing anything and everything without a strategy in place, without having, part of what makes a good strategy is not what you say yes to, it's what you say no to. So I was just saying yes to anything and everything. There is an element of that. Again, when you are just starting out, you do need to kind of like try things out. You never know. You do need that energy and that proactivity, but just up to a certain point. And I just went past that point. So that, for me, that strategy, knowing, where to draw the line in terms of your own, self-care, your own founder health, that was a big lesson I learned. Prioritizing high quality talent as well. So don't like scrimp or save on talent, like pay more for someone that's high quality and it will pay dividends, because alternatively the other ways they're more of a hindrance than a help if you kind of, if you don't get someone that's great on the team early on.
Yeah, there's something to be said about hiring, great talent so that you can delegate and focus on actually leading your business. And the thing about strategy, it's that quadrant, isn't it? Urgent, important, not urgent. Things that you can say yes to, things that will drive your business, things that won't. It's something that you learn over time.
Yeah, the hard way.
Yeah.
A lot of us need to learn it the hard. Yeah, and I was in a very privileged position. I still am, in terms of having that agency model where I get to work with so many different clients, and now with the podcast, interviewing different entrepreneurs as well. But the privileged position I mention is having that exposure to, not only your own personal business journey, but especially when you're working with startups, founders, high growth, scaling businesses, you're exposed to their business stories vicariously, through them. So there's a lot of lessons that I also learned, again, the the ones are the deepest cuts, right? The ones that really hurt, that you go through, those direct experiences, those are like the unforgettable lessons. But, there's something to be said for, oh, there's a pattern here. Like all these entrepreneurs, these founders, like they seem to keep coming up against these same obstacles. And so, yeah, I learned so much from them as well.
That's amazing. I mean, a milestone is definitely the fact that you set up your own business, you grew it to a significant revenue, and probably work with some great projects and amazing brands as well. I'm pivoting now because you've now gone completely the other way in terms of going the collaborative route and starting BOMBA by joining forces with the co-founders.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to really understand that. So why did you decide to, join with other founders? And is there any power or strength that comes from the collective effort of, establishing a brand agency with two other people or three?
Yeah, great question. There's always such a debate on the co-founder versus solo founder thing. And I was just chatting to someone about this yesterday. I think the grass is always greener, right?
Yeah.
It's never perfect. There are pros and cons in either situation. Right now, because it's early days, I'm really, really enjoying, and I'm really grateful to have two other co-founders in the mix. And I know that I have that deeper appreciation because I went through running my own business on my own by myself for 6 years. And there were a lot of points during that time with Bloom where I wished I had a co-founder. So whether it was just to be able to divide and conquer, whether it was to be able to hand over the baton, to go and take a holiday and take a break, and just the practicalities of feeling so thinly spread, especially during the busier times where you've got team meetings, you've got client presentations, but you've also been invited to an event and you need to do some networking and you forgot to post that day. And it is easy to think, if there was someone else in here with me. And a lesson that I learned on that side of things, with Bloom is it's a lot harder. Nothing is ever impossible, of course, but it is a lot harder to bring in a co-founder to an existing business than it is to go in just fresh from others, with others. So that was a challenge, because I did have a couple of conversations after I'd already started Bloom, a few years in. But the best analogy for that is kind of like you've got kids from a divorced marriage. And you've got that kind of baggage that you're kind of taking over, and you're trying to find a partner to help kind of fill that role of like dad in your family unit. I always thought of Bloom as my baby. And so, the other person, of course, needs to feel that same level of ownership and proactivity. And it's just not going to come if it's something that you've already started and you've been building for the past few years. So I am really, really excited with the new BOMBA venture at the moment, having two other co-founders. One of the really big things that I'm experiencing with that, like the biggest benefit, is we are greater than the sum of our parts when we're all joined up. So 1 + 1 + 1 = 10 in this situation. And this is also, and that's completely genuine, it's authentic, and actually it kind of comes through in a bit of the sales pitch, because there's an argument for, why should we be bringing in you guys as the team versus, say, hiring an in-house brand person or working with a freelancer. And that is one of the benefits, if it's a right fit, is you're not just getting a collective, you're getting this power of all these different minds coming together and what we're all able to produce as a result of that. So yeah, tons of benefits on the co-founder side of things, but as I said, I wouldn't have that same appreciation if I hadn't already gone through running my own. I had that itch to scratch first with Bloom. So there's power in numbers at the moment, definitely.
Yeah, and definitely you're all bringing, specific skill sets, strengths, expertise. There's diversity in that, in the fact that you all bring something different from your experiences and how you've shaped the industry to the table. So I think, good for even finding two people who just want to collaborate and say we want to work together.
That's the other thing is, and this is where, you know, anyone who is listening, who's maybe who is on their own, and they were in the position that I was in with Bloom and wishing that they had a co-founder or someone that's looking to start off something. As someone who's very much a master of her own destiny, you just saying about, you know, good for you for finding those people, that's the other thing, you know. It's like, it is a marriage. You can't, not that you can't, but it is a lot harder to be like, right, I've got this profile, this is what I want. I actually did that years ago. I put together a job description, or at least a few bullet points on like who I think would make the ideal co-founder, and I put it out there. I shared it with my network. I was like, look, I'm looking for someone to partner up with. And yeah, you know, nothing came back, because it's just...
Yeah, I was gonna say, how did that work out for you? Because it's a bit like on dating apps and having these long checklists, and ultimately you just want to meet a person. Do you connect on, you know, certain things? They may be core values and ethics, and that should be the foundation.
Yeah, it's just not how it works. Yeah, I mean, again, it does for some people, you know, never say never, but the three of us all came together completely organically. It was not planned. It was not, like you say, it wasn't like a Tinder day. It wasn't like putting out a job description. It was a really fortuitous, organic coming together of the different parties. And, you know, the downside to that, if you will, is that you can't fully control that process. So it's annoying. It's annoying when you are a master of your own destiny and you want to achieve things, you want to make this happen. Sometimes I think when it does come to other people, you've got to let go a little bit, and you've got to see what's the universe going to bring up for me here. And, you know, if you know when to let go, know when to push back, that's where, you know, you need to let other factors come into play there.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing what BOMBA's doing. For the audience, you might want to pop onto LinkedIn and see the post of what the various names were before they decided on BOMBA. But
that is one downside.
Yeah.
just on that, and so as you mentioned, that's really funny. That's a really great example, actually. I posted about all the different names, because with Bloom, like, this is a perfect example. With Bloom, it was all of 2 seconds that I came up with the name. There were no other names in the mix. It was just, there wasn't, you know, it just came to me. I found a URL that was the closest. I found a way I could call the company on Company's House. And then conversely, with BOMBA, you know, it was like 6 weeks of arguing with 2 other co-founders over all of these different potential names. And as I say, you know, if I hadn't already gone through 6 years of Bloom on my own, I would have found that so frustrating. I would have been like, oh, fuck's sake, come on, like, let's just choose something. This is ridiculous. But I knew that we would all, I mean, obviously I deeply respect and admire the other guys as well, so that helps. But I knew that we were going to come up with something great, something that we would all feel so confident with, something that we would really be excited to go out to market with. And I think it's just it's a nice anecdote. It's a really easy, direct comparison to be like, Bloom, me on my own, 2 seconds, came up with it, cool, done. BOMBA, 6 weeks of arguing on WhatsApp with the co-founders, but actually it's something that's, you know, really resonating, it's cutting through, and hopefully will be a bigger and more successful business.
But that was probably the good litmus test. I mean, the fact that you've gotten over and managed to come up with a brand name, you know,
it's done.
It's a good way to start.
Yeah.
Steph, you're also a VC scout. So can you explain for the audience what is a VC scout? And how does this fit into the broader landscape of, we know, venture capital and startup funding? And what motivated you to take on this role as well?
Yeah, great question. So for anyone who's not aware, so venture capital is all about kind of funding exciting new businesses, which tend to have a tech element to them, to have that scalability, because the way a VC fund works is that they are betting on the majority of their portfolio failing. It's a very risky, it's a high risk, high return type of business model. So they are betting on just really a handful of companies in their portfolio really, really, really making it big to deliver the returns over and above what all of the other guys would have probably lost. And so really risky kind of, venture capital game. The scout role is a position that helps with what's called deal flow for VC. So VCs, investors, they are hungry for deals. They want to be on the front line. They want to see what new emerging technologies are coming out, what innovative startups are being born, and particularly with Ada Ventures, which is the fund that I'm a scout for, they are specifically an early stage venture capital fund. So for them, it is very much like looking under rocks, looking in overlooked places where, these great ideas, they can come from literally anyone and anywhere. So for them, having a scout network, which is, a network of different individuals who are plugged in to different communities, whether it's geographical, whether it's having a particular diversity focus. My remit, for example, does have more of a leaning to female founders. So if there are any female founders listening to this, I'm a humongous supporter, a huge feminist. We can talk about that separately, but like, get in touch. More women need more money, full stop. So for Ada Ventures, having a scout network is really essential to having a diversified deal flow. So for them, of course, they do want to identify these potential opportunities that can deliver, the venture returns, but they are balancing that with having that diversity piece to it as well. And they're also very aware that, the whole venture capital game is hugely overrun by very well off, middle, upper class white people, and mainly guys as well, to be honest. So so they're also kind of using that scout network again to plug into those other communities. So that's my role with them. So really, if I come across something that's interesting, I do give feedback. I do kind of look at I've obviously seen quite a few pitch decks in my time as well, so I can't help myself either, but sort of give some advice and direction to help support with that process, and then kind of give a bit of that preferential treatment, if you like, going through a scout, pitching that deal to the VC firm. In terms of getting involved, sorry, were you going to ask me something on that?
No, I just find it very interesting because I was just looking at the stats in terms of, VCs. They know that 90% of startups will fail.
Yeah.
So like you said, it's a high risk, high return if it does work. Businesses that started off bootstrapped with $0 and then selling for 250 million or IPOing. And there's also a report in Bloomberg that talked about % of venture capital money goes to female founders.
And Tola, it's so infuriating. It's so infuriating, to link back to a comment you made earlier about, how far we've come in terms of advertising. You mentioned before about the Mad Men era in the 60s. And when you look at the gender stats, in terms of gender equality, we're still in the Mad Men era. We can talk about AI, machine learning, sending rockets to space and all this other stuff, but you're like, we still have these really, really bad fundamental problems when it comes to gender equality. We're not there. We're a really long way off from it. It's really, really infuriating. So I guess that's a nice segue into answering, the next part of your question, which is, how I got involved. And it was quite an organic thing as well. So similar to what we were saying with the co-founders, how you just, you meet people, you cross paths, and sometimes you can't control those things. But I think there was a bit of a combination with, I was putting out some of this stuff about gender inequality, how passionate I am about the space, how much I want to support female founders. So I think that was probably in the back of their mind as well when we had that chat. Was like, look, obviously we can see you're super active in that space, very plugged into the female founder community. It would make a ton of sense to have you as part of one of the founding, VC Scout members. So yeah, that's how I got involved. But it is really annoying. I mean, when you look at things like the unconscious bias as well, I'm sure about, there was that famous TED talk that described that shared the questions that male founders are asked versus female founders. So how male founders are typically asked questions, and this is just completely subconscious, like the unconscious bias. Male founders are typically asked kind of growth related questions. So like, how are you going to capitalize on the upswing? How are you going to maximize, getting this market share? Whereas female founders are typically asked about minimizing risk and having more of that protectionism and kind of cautionary sort of approach to it. There's so much all kind of in the mix there, from like how we're conditioned as kids and all the way through. And actually, one last thing I'll just share on this really briefly is this is currently my biggest bugbear, and this really pisses me off, if it's okay to swear on your podcast. This is really
Go for it.
this I have to get this off my chest. Is I am in various WhatsApp groups, like Slack communities, different forums and things, but particularly WhatsApp groups for different entrepreneurial communities. And there's one WhatsApp group which is for startup founders, full stop. And there's one that is specifically for female founders. The former, which is for startup founders in general, has just naturally become extremely male dominated in terms of the people who are in the group, but more so the people who are active and the ones who are more kind of vociferous, if you like in that group. It's just like very naturally got like very male, very white. And I know there are at least some women in that group, myself included. Like, it's not a female only thing, but we're all quiet. We don't say anything. It's all these guys. The female founder one, the contrast of the conversations that happen in these WhatsApp groups is so incredibly infuriating. And this is where I'm like, I don't want to point fingers. We don't get anywhere by blaming anyone. But when I see things like this, we don't help ourselves either. So I screenshotted a particular message that was shared in the female founder group, and it was all going off at the same time as this other general one. In this general group, they talk about exit strategies, commercials, they talk about shares, they talk about, an angel wants to pull out, all of this, like just straight like business stuff.
Yeah.
In this female founder group, I could not believe, it just outraged me that I saw people talk about where to buy prams from. It's absolutely unbelievable. Like, where to buy stuff for like nurseries and prams.
Do you think it's hard because they're trying to find a way to bond and form a, like there's a time and a place for everything, isn't it? And you sort of feel this is a group which is supposed to be, I'm not a fan of WhatsApp groups because I think they always go off on a tangent always. But that's another podcast. But, I think what I've seen with women, we're trying to find our tribe, our community within a professional space, camaraderie and so on. And that's sort of a way of bonding. But I also do understand, playing devil's advocate, the other side of, we already know that 2% of funding is only going to us. So let's be strategic in these groups so that we can get as much knowledge, lift one up, and share all the things so that you can get the funding you need, your business can grow. Let's utilize these platforms to the best of our abilities.
Yeah. My big thing is male allyship. Like, I've spent a lot of years thinking about this whole, I actually try not to think about it too much now, because as you can tell, it gets me really, really wound up. And I just I have to protect my energy sometimes because I really do hate it. But this whole, even just that distinction of like the fact that there are still female founder only, whether it's WhatsApp groups, whether it's private member clubs, as you say, yes, there is a time and a place for everything, and I get the community and the bond and all the rest of it. But you just said something there with lifting each other up, and my belief is, well, if I'm at a particular level, the highest I can lift you up to is up here, is to my level. If the guys are the ones who are still getting the majority of the funding, who are in positions of power, if they still have the majority of the seats around the boardroom table, does it not make more sense
We need
to
allies. Yeah.
like to cozy up to like the people who like this is just it's just kind of logical to me. But it's
Yeah.
just, you know, I like the other thing, or more of just a practical, quick financial thing as well, like another thing that I've observed, and more from that VC scout perspective, is women never ask for enough. Women, like just even in like the fundraise amounts, like a man will be going for 1 million, like seed round, a woman will be going for a quarter of that. Like, you and I actually, if we can talk about this really briefly, because this is actually super relevant and interesting, the dinner that we met each other at, I feel like you know what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Minority of people sat around the table were women. There was still a handful of women, but like fine. The few women that were sat around the table, half of the few, ourselves included, well, we're not, the other half, not me and you, the other half of the women there, how much did they put themselves down every time they opened their mouth, Antola?
Oh yeah, that is like, and that's why I had to say.
That's why you spoke up. I'm so glad you spoke up.
Stop saying sorry. Stop apologizing. You've started a business. It's driving a
How
significant amount of
infuriating was that?
revenue, and we need to thank our ally, you know, Nathan. We've been organizing this because he's really an ally in this for us. But yeah, it starts with that. So you're basically not only looking as a scout for. I was going to talk about that. So what qualities or characteristics do you look for in founders and entrepreneurs when considering investment opportunities?
There has to be a huge level of passion. On a practical level, it needs to drive you forward because it is so tough. You have got the highs and the lows. So the passion piece there is ensuring that it sustains yourself as a founder. When the going gets tough, you care enough about this to keep going. And that's where like a little bit of the crazy comes in as well. Like everyone talks about a bit of the founder crazy. So having that dogged determination, that deep passion for something. And the other reason why passion matters so much for founders is because it needs to come across in even just a sales kind of perspective. So like if you're selling to investors, if you're selling to people, if you're selling to partners, passion is at the root of that too. I've spoken to founders where it's like that passion just like isn't coming across. And if you're not passionate about it, then like I'm not, you know, you just need to get like other people excited is the basics of it. So definitely that passion first and foremost, the determination, the resilience, and on the rest of it, you know, you can learn. Like you can learn how to, you know, put together a decent balance sheet, how to train people, how to interview. But those really core passion and determination, I think, are just like the two non-negotiables.
I just want to circle back for the audience because you touched on the VC framework of questions and how they're asked in two different ways. So just looking at the Harvard Business Review, and really, I'm not shocked, but I'm not surprised. So you talked about how male and female entrepreneurs are asked different questions by VCs and how it affects how much funding they get.
Exactly.
So they call this the psychological theory of regulatory focus. So investors adopt what is called promotion orientation when quizzing male entrepreneurs, which means they focus on hopes, achievements, advancements, ideals. Conversely, Steph, when questioning female entrepreneurs, they embrace prevention orientation, which means they're concerned about safety, responsibility, security, vigilance, you know, and 67% of the questions posed to male entrepreneurs were of promotion orientation, while 66% of them posed to female were of the prevention. And just to simplify, if someone is saying this is all gobbledygook, so a promotion question would be, acquisition. How do you want to acquire customers? And then a prevention question would be retention. How many daily and monthly active users do you have? So that even the wording is just completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and questions like sales, how do you plan to monetize this would be a question asked to a male. And then for a woman, it would be margins. How long will it take for you to break even? And you're just thinking, I mean,
it all came out in a famous, I can't remember the name, it's escaped me now. I'll try and find it and we can put it in the show notes if anyone is curious. But there's a famous TED Talk. I'm gutted I can't remember the name of the speaker because they're amazing. But we'll find the link to it. But there's a TED Talk that came out that I think made that whole research piece viral. It's really infuriating. And then again, it's so nuanced. There's so many elements to it. Whether it's the unconscious bias in the questions, whether it's the fact that there aren't many female investors on the other side of the table either.
I think
And
so.
a really common theme I hear over and over and over is when female founders are pitching for money, they're talking to a room of men and they don't get it. And like, as much as, yeah, they're money guys and they talk in numbers, that's BS. It's total BS. We're still humans. We still have emotions, and it's the emotions that come first. We're still evolutionary, beings from thousands of years ago. And the thing is like, if it's something that makes them feel uncomfortable, if it's anything to do with, let alone bloody like menstrual care or, or fertility or anything, if it's more biological, anything that's more specifically to do with women, there's number one, there's already an initial discomfort. Like, how many men are comfortable just openly talking about periods to begin with, just to have a chat, let alone putting their money where their mouth is and funding these real problems. I've come across so many great startups that are solving real problems that a huge segment of the population are going through, whether it's things like endometriosis, for example, all these things that just get so overlooked by the guys, and they don't get. And the same applies, obviously the day job for me is more in the branding and marketing space. And if the first thing is people need to be open and aware and familiar. Those are the first levels of the nurturing before you get anywhere near to either having customers parting with their cash or having VCs investing in your company. It's the same thing. If you're marketing to consumers or you're trying to get investment, if there's already that taboo, that discomfort to begin with. So that's the thing. So going back, if it's a tiny minority of women who are the ones who have the money, it's all part of the mix. So this is another call for arms, if you like, for any listeners. So whether you're a female founder trying to raise investment, get in touch. Let's see if it's a fit for Ada Ventures or if there are other investors that this would be suitable for. And conversely, if you are a bit more well off, if you've sold a business or you've got a cushy day job and you think you could dabble with some angel investing as a woman, please consider it as an option, because money talks and we need more of it flowing with women.
I love that. And, good podcast even to be talking about that, because we're aiming to empower women out there, and we love our male allies that are out there supporting us. So let's talk about the industry. So are there specific focus or industry preferences you look for when you're scouting for startups, or is there a niche? And what emerging trends or industries are you looking for? Because obviously you're trying to get that return on the investment for the VC.
Yeah, great question. So with Ada Ventures, thankfully I can now give a succinct answer, because their latest fund does have a clear focus on three main areas. So I mentioned before, Ada Ventures as a fund, just generally speaking, is early stage. So first of all, pre-seed, seed, average check size is around 500K to 1.5 million. So that's the first thing. So if you're starting out, it's early days still, you're pre-series A, then that's the first thing to bear in mind. In terms of sector focus, so three main areas as part of their investment thesis. So one is around climate change. The second is around healthcare and the aging population. And the third area is economic empowerment. So again, where there's minorities or overlooked areas, underserved, that help redistribute the wealth, because the wealth gap is just widening and widening. So again, very impactful, very mission-driven, like three core areas of their investment thesis. Beyond that, if it's not a fit for Ada Ventures, then I am plugged into that investor space, and I do know others, whether it's other early stage VCs or other angel investors. So I'm quite open personally to kind of look at different things. In terms of looking at, emerging trends and what what VCs are betting on in order to make that return, I was listening to another interesting podcast which was talking about the psychology of FOMO now. I know nothing drives investors like FOMO. So if they see there's a new buzzword, or someone else is getting excited about something, or if 10 other VCs have invested in somewhere else, that is the number one like key driver that gets them moving. And it's funny because actually in one of my episodes, a founder talked about how they just managed to get their first initial angel investors over the line, and they very savvily use that as leverage to then get the next set of investors, to basically just use that social proof. So coming back
So
to
and so is already on board.
exactly.
This is
Exactly.
happening.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because it actually just went live yesterday as well, that episode, because that particular entrepreneur, he didn't share how much those first investors had actually put in. But yeah, so not, not lying, maybe a version of the truth with that. But coming back to the emerging trends is the psychology around the FOMO. There's this one theory, which is because the dot-com boom that happened like 20 years ago was so seismic, and it was so impactful, and there were so many people who didn't move quickly enough, who are still around now, who still remember it. That's kind of never left them. And now whenever there is anything like crypto, AI, any of these other like buzzy trends, it's kind of rooted in that previous technological boom that's driving them to not want to miss out again this time around. What I would say to this is these are such short-term cycles, and we've now seen, like I was saying before, with the short window, even just with social media and the cycles that we've gone through with that, we've also in that same space of time already seen the highs and lows, the rise and fall of the likes of Uber, WeWork, even the whole cryptocurrency space. So I think like now there is a little bit more kind of intelligence around, okay, let's not just kind of jump on the bandwagon. These aren't just kind of quick buck sort of things. I'm very much aligned with Ada's investment thesis around healthcare, climate change. I think those are real problems that are here to stay, that need fixing.
Yeah, I mean, there's really an excitement around artificial intelligence because it's, I think probably the sixth industrial revolution if you've studied the different phases. But yeah, that I was talking to a head of a VC, and he said, look for businesses where there's a need. So like you said, economic empowerment, or there's a need in the future or now for people, whether it's underrepresented groups. But also, if you're a founder and you're passionate about a project and you've got an idea, still, go forth with that. But it's challenging when everyone is looking for what will be the next, business idea that will go crazy out there. Yeah,
it is. You're totally right. I think that is such a big challenge, is identifying not only a big enough problem to solve, but also something that you deeply care about. Because again, going back to those characteristics that you look for in a founder, that passion, that determination. I've definitely worked closely. I've seen firsthand how there's some founders, they're usually always men, where they do take more of that analytical approach, where they do say, okay, where is there a gap in the market? What could potentially bring these big returns? What's going to make this become a unicorn one day? And it honestly, for me, like, it's not coming from the right place. It makes business sense, totally. I'm definitely not arguing with that. But for me, it just doesn't, like, they never work out. They never work out because they don't have the same level of deep drive and passion to pull the all-nighters, to stay up at night, to go to that extra networking event. You're not driven by that deeper emotional, passion. So that's the challenge, is finding something, and it doesn't always need to be a unicorn, right? Like, if you're going to choose one or the other, trying to build something that's going to be huge or trying to build something that you're massively passionate about, my advice would be take the latter, because conversely, like all these things in life, you may well even stand a better chance. Probably will stand a better chance of that becoming more successful anyway, but you're driven by the right things when you're doing it.
And for the audience who doesn't know what a unicorn business is, because we're using all these words, and I was like, a unicorn? What's going on? Is it airy fairyland? So it's referred to a privately held startup business with a valuation of over 1 billion, and it's commonly used in the venture capital industry. And apparently the term was first popularized by venture capitalist Eileen Lee. There you go, the unicorn status. I mean, that's just amazing. Any businesses who've achieved that. I think Kim Kardashian's on the cover of Forbes because obviously she started a VC
Yeah, I love that.
business.
Yeah.
And I think I love to see that. More women, we need to get them in doing that. Serena Ventures, Serena Williams has done that.
Yeah.
The founder of Bumble's got a VC as well. So
Yeah.
we need just more. Get more.
Yeah, I really love that. I really, really, really do. And I love that you mentioned Kim Kardashian as well. I look up to her. I think she's massively admirable.
I love her.
Right?
I love the business. So these are three things I love about the Kardashians. One, the fact that they're a family. You know, I'm the oldest of 8, and my mother passed away 16 years ago.
Wow.
And I just love that whole family thing. My mom was all about family, growing up together, supporting each other. So I resonate with that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not a billionaire, but, you know, the core values and ethics of that. 2, the fact that they leverage social media and turn it into a business. And then she then said, well, instead of us wearing other people's stuff on the show, let's create our own brands and leverage that. So whether it's Skims or, you know, a sister with Good American and all the things that they're doing, I think they should be, and probably there is a course at university about the business of the Kardashian Jenners. It should be studied economically.
It definitely should be.
On social media.
Yeah. I would be there. I would sign up in a flash. I mean, and you probably saw Kim Kardashian did actually. She went and gave a talk at Harvard recently, and the fact that she is now, I think she's super, super savvy. The fact that she, you know, you mentioned on the cover of Forbes for Sky, her new venture capital firm. The fact that she's a lawyer. I don't know if you also saw, but they put they put Kim Kardashian and Hillary Clinton on the same law test. They gave them the same test. And Kim Kardashian came out with higher results, a higher grade than Hillary Clinton, which, you know, not getting into politics and different opinions and stuff. But it's funny because obviously her and Paris, we won't go on too much of a tangent here, but her and Paris Hilton were obviously kind of, they knew each other from before. And what's interesting is both of them they consciously portrayed this ditzy, dumb image of themselves in the media. I don't know if you saw, so Paris Hilton came out a while ago now, like even the voices that they both used, they both put on voices as part of these characters to appear dumber than they actually are. And both of them are coming out and being like, no, actually, we're these super savvy, successful businesswomen. So the fact that Kim Kardashian now, you know, she is a lawyer, she passed the bar, she gave a talk at Harvard, she's a partner in a venture capital firm. It's like this woman who was famous because of a sex tape is just amazing.
I mean, hey, and we're not encouraging the audience to go and do a sex tape to start their business. We're talking about the business side of the Kardashian empire and just, you know, leveraging social media, thinking about different businesses. And I think Skims is probably worth more than Spanx. I've not looked at the stats, but surely it must be.
I wouldn't be surprised. But even they, even Skims versus I mean, even them, both female founders, both incredibly successful. So no, exactly. I love what you're saying. I think it's really important actually to underscore that point you made with, you know, whether it's Serena Williams, Whitney Wolf Herd, Kim Kardashian, having more of those visible women that are, they're all mothers as well, coincidentally, like their mums, their parents, they are succeeding and it's going in the right direction. You know, as much as there's still a lot of work to do, it's the exactly those sorts of things, these conversations, this great podcast that you've put together. This is all great stuff.
Amazing. Right. Let's talk about being agile and adaptability. And this applies whether, you know, we're talking about founders, entrepreneurs, as a VC scout, but even you who obviously started your own business and as a co-founder. In your experience, how important is it for a business owner, founder, entrepreneur, all of it, to be able to adapt and pivot?
Yeah. I feel like the obvious answer, sorry, to your question is yes, of course. It is super important to adapt, to pivot, especially now in a post-pandemic era where it felt like every Tom, Dick, and Harry was pivoting in the year 2020. So I feel like that really became the trend du jour. And again, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed too have talked about how one of the key skills that actually surprised them with their own businesses was letting go of their own idea. And I think that's another really big challenge in entrepreneurship, is balancing a vision that you may have as an entrepreneur versus knowing when to let go, knowing when to adapt, knowing where to meet the market. My kind of pinch of salt with that as well is, like everything, it is a balancing act. I think you do still need to know like what your position is in the market. I think it's about knowing when to adapt without losing yourself. And I think that's where things like mission and purpose come into play, because I have seen lots of successful businesses that have pivoted. Even with Ada Ventures, they talk a lot about how, because they're investing at such early stages, they're actually not really looking as much at the business itself than they are at the founders. The entrepreneurs are the things that matter the most to them, because the business has such a high likelihood of changing in the next few years and adapting. It's how you go about that as a founder. So that's my point, is yes, it is important, but if you blow with the wind and you get caught up in any new trend, for example, again, going back to 2020, I came across a shoewear brand that just jumped on the bandwagon with masks again in kind of spring, summer of 2020. And it was just such an obvious, oh, cool, everyone's selling masks. It just, like, there wasn't anything special about it. There wasn't they were literally, it was such an obvious just jump on the bandwagon with everything else. And yeah, I mean, needless to say, that business is no longer around. So yes, adapt, but stay true to yourself and that core mission that you've set out for yourself.
Steph, public speaking. I mean, becoming a public speaker is, it's a pivotal moment, I suppose, to say, I've got something to say and I can articulate myself with great oratory skills. What drove you to venture into public speaking, and what impact do you think you have as a public speaker, and what influences you in terms of just going about it, and what are you passionate about addressing?
I'll answer the last question first there in terms of influences, because it kind of links with the whole feminism kind of chat as well. Is when we were talking about Serena Williams, Kim Kardashian, etc., I totally get, you need to see her to be her, and female role models, super important, like, absolutely. Weirdly, for me, I don't need that as much. My influence is, funny enough, I used to really look up to Gary Vaynerchuk. And I've kind of moved on from him now. He kind of feels like an ex-boyfriend to me now. I've kind of like the rose tinted glasses have come up.
Motivation at a different stage of your life. I think that's it,
Yeah. And it was really funny because everyone around would be like, Steph, we don't really get it. Like, it doesn't, like, what? He's such a character. But I loved him. But I still obviously have a soft spot for Gary V. Obviously, I would still be crazy, like, starstruck if I ever met him in real life. But I've since kind of moved on, and now I'm kind of obsessed with Scott Galloway. Is kind of my more sophisticated
Professor G.
Prof
Amazing.
G. He's now my more sophisticated version of Gary Vaynerchuk. So those are two people that I really look up, especially Scott Galloway. So I mentioned those guys as well now on the public speaking piece, because they are both public speakers. They both do the rounds and deliver the keynotes at the top conferences and everything. And I really...
Galloway is writing a new book about masculinity.
Yeah, it's out. It's already out
now.
Yeah,
I need to get it for my sons.
Yeah,
because raise them as a single parent, and I think they need real life scenarios to guide them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, you're totally right. I think the book is out now. What is it called? Yeah, it's something around masculinity. We need absolutely more of these female role models. Yeah, for me, I don't know. There's something about Gary Vee, Scott Galloway, like these guys that still like really resonate. I still really look up to them. So I would love, I was thinking about this last night. I kind of used Gary Vee before as a bit of a blueprint, especially in terms of the public speaking game. And really annoyingly, I heard that his first paid public speaking gig was when he was 33, and I heard about it I think when I was 32, and I was like, right, I've got a year to
get this done.
Yeah, to match Gary Vee's timeline, and I didn't do it. And it really, like those kinds of things, I was like, fuck, I feel like I'm behind. And there's so much on social media about like, you're not behind, it's your own journey.
What was your first public speaking gig?
Yeah, so it was kind of a coincidental thing. It was through one of our first clients at Bloom about 4 or 5 years ago. It was actually an International Women's Day event. And at the last minute, the host, the moderator, fell ill and dropped out. And I, for whatever reason, was the natural next best thing to step in. So like, Steph, would you mind? It was really, really last minute. I was kind of roped in. So again, it was a really fluky opportunity, and I absolutely loved it. And I got such great feedback afterwards as well, and people couldn't believe that I'd just been dropped in at the last minute, and they were like, what, that was amazing. And it reminded me, and this is part of answering the first part of your question here as well, which is, how I got into it and stuff, is that fluky opportunity about 5 years ago to step in at the last minute reminded me of my very, very first burning ambition ever since I can remember, ever since I was teeny tiny, which was to be an actress. So this goes back to, how did you think about it? It's kind of similar to, the beginnings of my career, where it was like, it wasn't so much conscious. This was obviously just kind of a natural inkling that I had. I wanted to be an actress during my whole childhood. I was desperate for that. And that also links into your self-awareness piece as well. So if it's something that works for you, if you've got a natural ability or a natural strength, it's something that you enjoy, those are going to be different things for different people. For me, there's obviously a bit of that performer in me. I'm outspoken. I was always cast as the narrator in my school plays, which I always cried about because I wanted to be an angel, but because I wasn't blonde, I never got to play the part of an angel.
I know, crazy, right?
Oh, it's so funny.
Angel can be anything, yeah.
But it's, even thinking back to that, where it was like, I was the best spoken, I was I was very well read, I could speak very eloquently, I was always the natural choice to be the narrator, to literally be the storyteller of the nativity play. And because I wasn't blonde, I never got to be the pretty angel. It was such a telling kind of, who plays what roles. And I remember one year I cried. I was like, oh God, I don't want to do this anymore. But yeah, so whatever skills you've got, whatever strengths play into. And interestingly, it was through working with a fantastic business coach through Bloom that kind of gave me permission to lean into it, to actually be like, Steph, you've got a lot to say, outspoken, you're comfortable in front of the camera, you thrive, you get that adrenaline rush, like use that as part of one of your marketing channels, as part of a personal brand, lean into that. So yeah, she kind of gave me permission, and I've been building on that ever since.
I think that is such a great statement, because I do think public speaking does play in shaping your personal brand and influencing the community, the people you network with. It's all that vicious circle of putting yourself in the right position and also doing things you love. I think is
it's like that ikigai, isn't it? That Japanese framework. Start something you love that helps the business and everything. And again, that will be different for different people. For me, that ticks a lot of those boxes.
And a lot of things that you said about just leaning into it. There's no magic plan. I think sometimes we all set on a path and have a list of things we want to do, we want to achieve, but life is not linear in terms of the progression. But you have to just sometimes trust your instinct, jump into things. Sometimes life
Definitely.
throws you curveballs. If you don't have a job, take the first one you get. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
If you're starting a business, one might work out, start another one. There's
yeah.
so many
Go for it.
lessons learned that there's no one way to do things. But I think you mentioned about
Definitely.
resilience, passion, powering through, being consistent, being disciplined
Yeah,
will serve you well.
yeah.
Hey, do you have a specific goal or vision for your public speaking endeavors? But I think that's sort of manifested into the podcast, like
No, I do.
strategy and tragedy.
Yeah, I love doing the podcast, definitely. But yeah, no, I've also got other bigger goals on the public speaking side of things. I am really excited to actually be hosting Web Summit this year, which is amazing. I would love to I'd love to get to, yeah, I mentioned Scott Galloway before. I'd love to kind of meet those guys, like meet those guys in terms of where they're at in their career, in terms of delivering a keynote at the big conferences. Yeah, bigger stages, bigger events. That's kind of what I've got my sights set on.
There's a lot to be said because you've got lived experience in terms of branding and marketing in your agency and being a CEO and now a co-founder. So I think there's still a lot to come. Let's talk about networking and mentoring. You talked about having a business coach and how pivotal that's been for you. Is it something you sought out? Someone's listening and saying, okay, I think I need a coach. I think I need a mentor. What are questions I should be asking? What should I be looking for?
Yeah, great question. The best coaches will ask you the questions. So that's been one of the biggest surprises with working with such great coaches is being asked these questions that I'd never even thought of before, or getting me thinking about things in certain ways. I used to very wrongly think that the whole coaching game was a bit of a pyramid scheme. It was a little bit of I didn't really think it was that legitimate before.
What's in it for you? What's
Yeah.
the catch?
And I think it was because, again, maybe with 2020, I feel like there was such a boom where like every Tom, Dick and Harry was a coach, and it was all a bit like, I don't think it's a very regulated kind of thing. I think anyone can sort of do half of an online course and get a certificate and call themselves some type of coach. So it wasn't, to answer another part of your question there, it wasn't something that I actively sought out. I actually did have a lot of skepticism around it, to be completely honest with you. And again, funny enough, it was something that came up really organically, really naturally. I am quite a good networker, and I reached out to a few other panelists who were speaking at a conference that I was also at a few years ago. Just no agenda, to be honest. Like, I think that's another thing to share with your guests is there's a lot of networking I do with zero agenda. I think similar with us, where it was kind of like, let's connect, believe in the power of connection. You don't always know where things will end up. And so reached out to a few of these other fellow panelists. One of them happened to be an amazing business strategist, and we just had a few coffees, built that relationship, followed each other on social media, and I actually saw she was putting out, like this particular coach was putting out a lot of very valuable content. So that's a tip to share with anyone who's maybe considering finding a coach, looking for some help, is what are they already putting out there that's demonstrating their own expertise? Because the stuff that this woman was sharing was so helpful. It was so practical. There were so many things that I was already implementing, that I was already doing, that I'd learned from them. And then it was a gradual thing, actually. So there's a lot to learn in terms of their own sales and marketing strategy, because once they'd kind of hooked me in on their Instagram, they then ran more of a low ticket group program, again during the pandemic, actually. So that was a good way for me to be like, okay, actually let's give this a go, see what this is like. And it just kind of grew from there, and then continued to work with this person one-on-one and continued working with them for years. The other skepticism to just touch on as well was I very, very naively used to also think that, like, why would you need a coach when you're setting out to do your own business? Like, surely you should know what you want to do with your business. That's why you're a founder. Why do you need a coach? Like, it was I've completely changed my way of thinking on that, because of course if you look at any, the sports field is the obvious analogy. Michael Jordan had a coach. Like it's not a cop out. I think I always saw it as like a crutch, a cop out. Oh, can you help me? Can you give me the answer? It's kind of like at school where it's like, can I ask the teacher for the answer to this question? So I highly, if you find a good one, I think there probably are quite a few cowboys out there. I probably got very lucky with this one. I do recommend it. The other piece of advice that I'm recycling from good old Prof G as well is he talks about this thing called the kitchen cabinet of mentors, and having kind of like your own board of advisors, and however formal or informal you want to make that. But you can, depending on the stage that you're at, depending on what you can or cannot afford, you can tap into your community, especially if you've got kind of more senior mentors and things around you, and kind of lean on certain people for different strengths for different things. So whether it's marketing, finance, or just having someone that you can have a bit of a heart-to-heart with, sometimes it doesn't all need to come from one person necessarily.
Do you know, the stats say 70% of coaches improve work performance, relationships, and communication. 80% of coaches report increased self-confidence, which is something we all need. And 1 in 6 business owners turn to coaching to improve their performance because it's worth it. And then about mentors, it does say 33% of founders who are mentored by successful entrepreneurs going to become top performers. So, it's really
Can't
just to
argue with that.
yeah, those elements. But also, I think we just also want to I like to give real life advice as well. So Gabor Mate was on a podcast and he said, if you can't afford any counseling or a mentor, etc., read books, go on YouTube. Your mentor, coaches, etc., they're putting out content that you can easily digest.
Listen to
Go
podcasts.
to a library. Yeah, you can listen to a podcast. If you can use your phone to scroll endlessly, silly videos on TikTok and etc. You can use your phone to gain knowledge. And then at some point when financially or you're in a space where you can actually meet some coach or a good mentor will give their time without charging for it. So they're seeing it as though they're paying it forward.
I think for your listeners, I think many would be surprised to know how many people would say yes. Right? If you reach out to someone who's further along in their career, that's a bit more senior, don't be scared. You need to push through the fear. The worst that can happen is that
they'll say no.
They'll say no, or they won't answer you, but you'll be surprised more often than not. They'll probably say yes. They'll be up for a phone call because, as you say, many of them are happy to pay it forward.
Yeah. I'm loving that. We've talked about so many things, the many facets of Steph. Let's talk about Trailblazer takeaways. There were 3 things, knowledgeable things you want to impart. What would they be?
As you said, we've covered a lot already on this podcast. So I think I'll just kind of underscore just a few things that we've already spoken about in summary, basically. So 3 trailblazing. Well, it's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? 3 trailblazing takeaways. So for the women listening, I'm going to steal this from you, Antola. Stop apologizing. I'm so happy that you spoke up at that dinner. Honestly, that was really grinding my gears. If it's more women kind of listening, stop apologizing. Go for it. Ask for more money. Secondly is, if you're a bit like me in terms of you're such a doer and you want to go for it, I've learned the hard way how to put the brakes on myself. So the power of strategy, the strategic thinking. And I think the third thing there is reach out for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it's, as we were just saying, reaching out to mentors. You'd be surprised how much people are happy. It makes people feel good to help other people. So don't feel guilty. Don't feel bad. Don't feel like, they're doing you such a big favor. People like to feel good as well. So just remember that and put yourself out there.
Steph, this has been amazing, as always. Lots of nuggets there. I've written a few notes myself, things I need to take on board. But that's a cycle of life where we're always learning, and having great conversations with great women is part of it. So thank you so much for joining me.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for, again, putting together this podcast. I love what you're doing here. And I really do hope that it helps inspire the women listeners to do better, go harder, and make more money.
Love that. On that note, this has been the Trailblazers Experience Podcast. You know where to find us on all streaming platforms. Please tell another woman about this podcast, and remember to share, like, and subscribe, and stream and download. That's all we ask. Thank you.